Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
It's been hard to do anything normal in the last few days, and it's also important to do things normal on some level. There's resistance that takes place on battlefronts and with weapons, and there's resistance that takes place when Jews around the world say, nothing will stop me from living and celebrating and reveling in my Jewish life. That's how we try to handle that mixture on Simchat Torah. For us, it's really on the nose because of where we happen to be in the story. You pull out for a little bit. We drop so deeply into each syllable. If you pull out, we're talking about an oppressed Jewish people and pounding the oppressor with wave after wave after wave of plague to try to get the oppressor to change their mind without a whole lot of success. And eventually we know where this story is going, that the implacability of the enemy ultimately leads to the death of their own children. So it's right there, folks. And I suppose it would be also poignant if we were in a random verse in Leviticus, but it's hard and impossible and important to dive back into text and find the redemptive aspects of studying together and of being a learning community together. I'm just going to let someone in who's trying to come in on Zoom. I forgot, by the way, to do the standard welcome to those who are here in the conference room, and to those who are joining via Zoom, and to anyone who's watching on Facebook Live, and anyone who is listening to this after the fact on the Temple Beth Am podcast. And if you're just joining us, we've been talking about how complicated and important it is to study the tradition, even and especially in times of distress, to reclaim what is precious to us, and how complicated it is to be studying this particular text as we send another wave of plagues to our enemy as a way of trying to protect and redeem ourselves. So not much has changed in 3,200 years. And I think if we're honest with ourselves and we listen to the words of Kohelet, while giving up, while having Yeush might be sinful on some level, not much may change. Something will change in the next few days. That there will be different circumstances, but I fear that our ancestors and our descendants will have and will be telling the same story on some level. That's very heavy, and throughout, Jews will continue to gather and study Torah. So I'm sure it's sort of needed on some level, but I also know that if we start going this direction of people have been sharing what's present for them, that will take up the entire class, which again probably would be needed and cathartic. But I also want to be able to really claim this as a moment of Torah. So maybe we'll spend a few minutes if people want to share what is present for them in their hearts, and in particular, if you would direct your thoughts on the nexus between what you've been experiencing as a Jew and as a Ohev Yisrael and as a Zionist over the last few days, the nexus between that and sitting to study Torah, meaning if there's something that's coming to you about what this moment feels like, let's spend some time hearing that, and then we'll go back into lice and find illumination there.
Renee. Of hearing, can you just talk a little bit louder? I know you've been doing the davening and stuff quieter, but
yes, is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Did the people on Zoom actually hear what I just said about what? Okay.
I heard you. It was just hard to hear.
Understood. No one needs to, but does anybody want to share about something about what this juxtaposition, this nexus feels like? Ilan, take a microphone and go right into it.
Yeah, so this began actually for me on Sunday night when I was leading Mariv, and it said, saying the prayer, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shomer amo Yisrael la'ad, protector of the people Israel forever. And then continued when I was saying Kaddish, and even continued into this morning when we're studying Torah, which to a large degree has to do with the greatness of God and the deeds that God performed to rescue the Israelites from Egypt. And when you juxtapose that to the absence of God, I would say, and just the sheer brutality that occurred, it's a struggle to be able to try to acknowledge God's greatness at times like this.
Yes. Thank you, Ilan. I also found the liturgy over the weekend to be, if you'll excuse the analogy, every sentence an explosion. Ana Adonai Hoshiana, please God save us. Lo hametim hallelujah, those who are dead will no longer praise you. Even the cheery song Od Avinu Chai, I kept thinking about how many Israelis will now no longer be able to say that my father's still alive. So our songs and our liturgy emerge from our national experience, and our national experience has been asking God for salvation for many millennia, and sometimes with no direct response. It's hard. Barbara.
Well, I just kind of wonder whether or not, since we're all one big family, whether or not we shouldn't be saying Kaddish for our dead as a family, the whole synagogue, for some period of time, whether it's 30 days or whatever, that maybe we should do it as a family and say Kaddish for everybody, for the Jews that have died.
Yeah, we've had lots of conversations amongst the clergy about what are the right liturgical adjustments to make for this time, and there's no one right or wrong answer, and every community is doing it differently. We've chosen, rather than having everyone say Kaddish at all time, to make some other changes to make it very clear that this is not normal, not a normal time. But I hear what you're going for, and we'll consider it that again. And certainly anyone who feels personally moved to do so can and should do that. Anyone else? What is hovering for you right now before we jump into the book of Shemot again? Stevie?
I feel like I finally understand chapter 8 of Esther, that it's like the king gave permission to fight back and even to, if necessary, go a bit further than fighting back. And it's obviously not a historical book, but I can understand why someone wanted to write that story that way.
Thanks, Stevie. Joanna?
As a teacher who spends most of my waking hours now with fourth grade students, there's a very fine thread and like sort of this guard I have to put up that I can't be me in front of my students, that I have a duty on some level to protect them a little bit. And the school has given us a lot of guidance around that. And also given us outlets for us teachers to find spaces away from our students, but also to help my students process also on a level that's appropriate for them. And I'm spending a lot of my days now anticipating the return of a student of a family I've been in touch with, who, for beautiful reasons, extended their Sukkot travel to Israel beyond Sukkot, are now in Israel without, as of today, a flight home. And, messages from the family. I don't know if we'll when we get back, we'll send the kid to school because she's very traumatized right now. and writing back, like the academics, like we don't care about. School might be a great place for her to be, just to be among friends, but how we're going to modulate that when she comes back. What is she going to say to her classmates? And all of those thoughts running in my head, also like the amount of time I'm spending thinking about that and realizing also that is like the minutest fragment of like the tragedy that has befallen our people.
Yes. I don't know why this strikes me right now, but it strikes me that, Joanna, that you're so much an integral part of this class and this experience, and we've never met you in person. You're so much a part of this community, and we look forward to when we get to actually be with you in person and daven with you. Thank you for that, Joanna. Renee.
Okay.
There we go.
I just feel just consumed. I feel like the hardest thing for me is that no matter how much we take on in our family, and no matter how much we are with our family, because we're constantly on the phone, I feel like it's in our blood, that there's this sense of frustration that no matter what we do or how much we do, it's not enough. And I just have this constant sense of what else can we do? What else can we do? And when as much as we talk to people and they say, we don't need food, we don't need this, we appreciate all that people in the States are doing for us, but there's a lot of stuff that we really don't need. And I think a lot of what we're doing is just more for a sense for us to feel like we're doing something.
It's a little bit of both, right? There is some of our doing things in order to do something, and there are some unbelievable projects going on, just the ones that I know of, and that I know of coincidentally are inspiring on the level. They're going to be the stories that are told 50 years from now, the way we tell stories about, what's his name, Mickey Marcus, right? The Americans who found a way to literally help bring independence to Israel. There are incredible efforts that are actually directly helping.
And even that line that Lev said, I just started bawling when I heard that, because it's not right. It's not right that somebody that's his age should even question something like that.
What she's referring to, as I put on Facebook yesterday, as I was leaving for Minyan yesterday, Lev said to me with just kind of a normal tone voice, but you know how there's a day in the year that we remember the Shoah? I said, yes. I said, is there going to be a day in the year that we remember this? That's what he asked. Judy, and then Marshall, and then we'll study Torah. Rabbi Judy. Oh, sorry, Barry. I'm sorry.
Rabbi.
The microphone in by Stevie. Yes.
Rabbi, thank you. I was so overwhelmed on Shabbat and on Sunday. I think completely in shock, and as my body's been processing this, it's like it's so visceral inside me. Rabbi, how many times I've been wanting to reach out and send you an email, and it's like I can't. And like Renee, I've been on the phone constantly. We have 3 groups of family, and to hear the news and the horrors, I feel so completely powerless. But when I speak to my cousins, I'm hearing their strength. We've got a number of young cousins on the front, and others who are working day and night. One is a lieutenant colonel in the reserve. As some of my relatives, they sound so strong. They tell me how quiet the streets are. I've got one dear cousin in the north, and I know they're going to be evacuated soon. And his son is on the front, and he says he's there, and all we need are your tefillot. That's all, your tefillot. And my parents are both survivors, and I'm thinking there wasn't enough help from us then. There wasn't enough help. And like Renee, what can we do? I know my sisters at Sinai that they're putting funds together to get an ambulance over there. They've lost a couple of ambulances. We're gathering clothes and supplies. I so want to be with you all face to face. And that's for me, it's for me. What can I do as a rabbi, as a chaplain? And I feel powerless. I want to be of support somewhere. I need your guidance, Rabbi. I don't know where. I want to do something. And that's what's going through me. Thank you for this space, Rabbi. I so appreciate it.
Thank you, Judy. Marshall and then Barry.
I was especially moved this morning during the davening when we sang Hatikva at the end. Odlo avda tikvatenu, we've not lost our hope. And as Stevie made reference to the biblical sources in Esther, I think of the biblical source in Ezekiel, avda tikvatenu, we've lost our hope, yavsha atzmotenu, our bones have been dried out. And how I think we have to keep on saying odlo avda tikvatenu, we have not lost our hope.
Yes. Barry?
I'm very troubled by what I'm going to say. We know that we're God's partners in miracles. God doesn't make miracles without our partnership. We let our guard down in too many ways. We got soft and comfortable and let our guard down. Now our muscles are pushing, but we let our guard down. And we lost the miracle. And we're in great suffering. It's a very difficult thing for me to bear right now. That we will learn from this to keep the muscle strong and never let it down, and not to assume that things are okay. Never to assume that again, ever.
Larry?
With respect for what everyone said and all the sentiments, I want to just offer a different perspective. I think we ought to look to the Haftarah for last week, when Joshua was told 4 times, Chazak ve'amatz, be strong and persevere. I understand everyone's sentiments, but there is another side. I think we need to show it. And I think we need to operate on it. So do what you can. There's plenty of places to give money, plenty of places to take action. Call your friends and relatives in Israel to support them. Cry when you have to, but chazak ve'amatz as well.
Thank you, Larry. Rosemary?
Just for finishing, I think we are between the letter N and S. Hamas and Haman are very close together. And I think we are in between the 2 letters. We will prevail. Keep hope. I think God is always there. When I buried my children, at that moment, God was more present than any time else. And I just feel now lucky because I could bury them. I could have Rabbi there. I could have prayers. And now, what are they doing?
Rebecca?
This Shabbat, there's going to be a solar eclipse that we can view at maximum 9:24 in the morning here. And I can't help but think, as natural wonders continue in this world, in this situation, there's going to be something special in that eclipse and as the sky darkens, especially this Shabbat.
Thanks, everyone. I know there's a lot more that isn't said. Next Shabbat is Parshat Noach. We're going to be reading words that will have a homographic poignancy when we're going to read V'tishachet ha'aretz lifnei Elohim, that the earth was destroyed in front of God, V'timaleh ha'aretz chamas, and the land was riddled with Hamas. Hamas in Hebrew means violence. It's a coincidence, by the way. I don't think that it's an odd coincidence, but I do not believe that there's any way in which the reason why Hamas in Gaza is called Hamas has to do with the Hebrew. But that's going to be a very, very painful verse to read, particularly as we think of the images of the earth being, of that ground being filled and riddled with members of Hamas. And this is not going to be anywhere close to easy or normal for a long time. I've been thinking a lot and saying a lot that tragedies have half-lives. Right, so think back to September 12th, right, 2001. It was utter fog. The world was turned upside down. It would never be the same. And it felt pretty similar on September 14th. And it felt pretty similar on September 16th. October 2nd, my daughter was born. I was thinking about her and how to change a diaper. And I was no longer 24/7 occupied with 9/11. And half-life means that however long the half-life is in chemistry, right, then at the same amount of time, again, it gets smaller. That's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's a good thing because we can't cope with the intensity forever. It's a bad thing because we start to be distracted by other things. For the Israeli army and the Israeli government, hopefully there's no half-life. But for us, we're going to wake up at some point soon-ish. And it'll feel different. It'll never feel okay, but it'll feel different. And going through our normal lives in a mostly normal way will feel okay, in the same way that we tell people on the last day of Shiva that you're allowed to be as sad as your emotional system needs to be, and now go live your life, as Larry was saying. The Beth Am connections are wide and intense. As far as I know, we do not have a member of Beth Am or a first-degree connection of someone who has been killed or injured or kidnapped. But if you go one level out, there's bleakness everywhere. We learned yesterday that Marilyn and Siggy Ziering's great-nephew, a major in the army, was killed in battle. This is Siggy's brother's grandson. My daughter Noah has a USY friend who was one of the captives in Gaza. When she was president of this USY region, he was the president of the New York region, and then his name was Omer Nutra, N-E-U-T-R-A, and he made Aliyah at some point, and he's confirmed in Gaza. And so many of the people in our community have children in Israel who are going to be called into duty, and some of them into real duty, right? So I don't know how long the half-life of this one's going to be. But it'll present itself, and in the meantime, we will continue to come to pray, altered, study the tradition with something hovering over us, showing love to one another and to our children, and hopefully finding every possible way to express support for the state and the people of Israel. That's what I hope and pray for. Let's go into the book of Shemot again. Thanks, everybody. Okay. We were halfway through a Rashi. We're halfway through the Rashi on verse 14 of chapter 8. Let me read the verse again so we can get there. By the way, welcome Suzanne. Suzanne is joining us. She's a new member of Beth Am, and she's come into just about everything our community does. Great to have you. I don't know, do you have a book? Do you have a book in front of you, Suzanne, that you got?
Yes, I have the Saperstein edition.
Perfect. Wonderful. Okay. So we're chapter 8 of the book of Shemot, verse 14. Let me read the verse again so we can so we can remind ourselves what we were talking about. It's that weird thing that we have seen and we're going to be seeing throughout the plagues, where the courtiers, the magicians of Pharaoh, seemingly, rather than trying to remove the plague that has been put upon them, they try to show their own mettle by doing it. The magicians did that with either their rods or their spells. If you remember the first time that verse came up in the blood plague, maybe even before that. Lahotziat hakinim, that interesting phrase, to bring out. Let's make it as literal a translation as possible. To bring out the lice. Below yacholo, and they were not able to. Vatehi hakinam, and the swarm of lice. We won't go back into that word hakinam, but it's a single feminine word referring to not the lice themselves, but a swarm of them. The lice were ba'adam on mankind, uva behema on animals. And we had read Rashi's one-word commentary on Lahotziam, and he says, lest you think that the Lahotziam means that what the Chartumim were trying to do was to remove the lice, because that's one way of understanding Lahotzi, to take out. Rashi's first word is livrotam, to create them, meaning to show that, hey, we also can bring lice on our people. We can also create lice out of nothing. We left it there. So Rashi reads this as kind of almost like jester-like magicians who, in trying to flex their muscles, are attempting to do something that will actually worsen the situation for their own people. Okay? Once again, many impossibly to avoid associations with what's happening right now. And that's where we paused, and we were halfway through Rashi, and we've got a little bit more Rashi to go. So, yes, Barry.
The last word I said when we ended last time, and you said we'd take it up here. Bamakom acher.
Yeah, we're
Makom is God's place. And what's this Bamakom acher?
Yeah, we're about to read that. Yeah. Alan, do you want to read that Rashi?
Not particularly, because without my glasses.
No problem. Marshall, do you want to read?
Is it 14?
It's the after the word livrotam on 14, but make sure the microphone is really close to you.
So this is Lo Yachlu,
Before Lo Yachlu.
Pardon?
Before Lo Yachlu, but Marshall, you have to speak right into the mic, otherwise they won't hear on Zoom.
Okay, so this is Lahotziat hakinim.
Too far away.
Yes.
Marshall, hold the microphone next to your face. Thank you. Sorry. We just want to include everyone on Zoom.
So Lahotziat hakinim, livrotam ulhotziam mimakom acher. And to create them and to bring them forth from some other place.
Right. So that's the question that Barry is asking about. We had only read the word livrotam. Some versions of Rashi also have the word ulahotziam, to create them and to bring them out. And then the phrase mimakom acher. What do people think the word mimakom acher means? It is true, Barry, that the word that hamakom was one of the names of God, but sometimes a cigar is a cigar. In fact, most times a cigar is a cigar. Makom just also means location, right? Norm, can we get the microphone down here for Norm? What do you think is Rashi's adding by, or what questions he answering by saying that they attempted to create them and to draw them out from another place?
They're coming from a different place. That is to say, from the sands, they've already been. It's been done by God, Moshe, and Aaron, or God and Aaron. But now they have to bring forth gnats or lice, kinim, from some other material because the sand has already been converted. So maybe they would be able to do it from some kind of produce or from rocks or whatever it would be. And if they could bring forth from that place, they could probably get rid of them as well. And maybe they could then be able to use a similar method to get rid of the existing ones. But they can't bring them forth from another place or even from the same place. They're powerless.
Good. And right. And Rashi hasn't gotten yet to the powerlessness of the Lo Yacholu. Any other possible read of what makom acher means? Joel?
I think he's they're trying to say that whereas God created them from scratch, they were just using a trick to try to move them.
Very good, right? I think most of the commentaries on Rashi think that that's what Rashi is saying, that they tried to do two things. They tried to create them, livrotam, and say, listen, I don't know if we can turn grass or sand into lice, but what if we can sweep up all the lice from somewhere else, bring them here, and it'll seem miraculous? Right? Just to suspend disbelief a bit, right? That can we do anything to show the Israelites and Moshe and Aaron and our boss that we can contend with all that's swarming around here, pun intended. Right? Rick, and then Renee, and then Barry.
Hi. My Silverman edition has a footnote, and the second sentence of that is, as all the dust of the land had become gnats. So the sentence before, all the dust of the land had become gnats already. So the footnote goes, they were compelled to direct their endeavors to creating gnats from another place. So maybe that helps with the other place, but I don't know where that would have been if the whole land was already gnats. They were trying to create them, but there were already gnats there. So I just thought I'd throw that in.
It's really kind of the norm way of reading it, or the Joel way of reading it, right? To create them from another source, that makom acher would be like another place that aside from the dust, or to not bring them into being from scratch, but to import the gnats, as it were. Renee?
I was going to say, similar to Joel, that it was from some other place, that it was the sorcerers bringing it, not from the soil, but somewhere else.
Got it. Okay. Barry?
Well, I'm going back to take makom literally as God's spiritual place, God's place. So a makom acher would be a different spiritual space. This would be the evil side, and that the sorcerers are playing to the evil side and that power, but they were unable to do it.
Joanna, your hand was up and now it's down. Are we good?
Covered by what other people said.
Okay, good. Okay, Marshall, now read the lo yacholu.
Lo yacholu.
He's a rookie.
Lo yacholu, she'ein hashed sholet abriya chuta mikasa ora. That for the demon is powerless in the case of a creature smaller than a barley corn.
Okay. This is a fascinating sentence, and it comes from a fascinating page of Talmud that is one of the windows, and we discussed this a bit last time, that shows that the rabbis were proudly monotheistic and weren't quite sure that there weren't other forces in the world that had partial divine-like powers, right? So there's a line in the Talmud, it's quoting almost verbatim. Shade is a demon or a spook or something like that. Sholet means to have power over. I love one of the modern uses of that root. The remote control is called the shalat. It's so great. I would have loved to be in the room when they were discussing in 1973. How are we going to call this thing? What root? Shalat. Okay, Moshe. Good idea. Okay, so that a spook or a demon has no control over a birya. A birya is the aleph isn't there, but it's the root, the vro, something that has been created, a creation smaller than a barley corn. What do you think? What do you think's going on here, Elon?
I'm just curious.
Microphone.
Is the converse of that a demon has control over something that is bigger than a barley corn?
Right. There's something counterintuitive about the line. You would think the opposite, right? Our God can control anything. The other demons, they can control specks, right? But it's saying the reverse, right? That the shadim and their powers, they might control large visible things, but they can't control microscopic things, but our God can, right? I think you're right. The implication of this is that a shade might have power over something larger than barley corn, but not a piece of lice. And it kind of asks us the question about, or makes us ask the question, well, there's a lot of ways of asking this, like, what did the rabbis believe about powers outside God's powers, and why did they believe that, right? And why did they want it included in rabbinic literature for us to understand that in addition to the omnipotency of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, there are also some other stuff out there that can get things done, right? Even against the will of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's complicated. Anyone else? Barry?
Think of God's essence, Yotev essence. Ayin is no thingness. And so the sorcerers, yes, the rabbis are positing, in the physical world, there are ways to manipulate the physical world, but God's essence is no thingness. There's no way to attach that.
Right, so as if it would seem more miraculous to manipulate minuscule microscopic things than larger things, perhaps. Yeah. Norm?
Zilberman suggests that it's related to what can be made, what can become tameh. So a place becomes tameh in the presence of the smallest bone of a corpse. And something smaller than a barley corn is smaller than the smallest bone of a corpse and would not render something tameh, and that somehow that is related.
It's wonderful to read this line about what Shadim are capable and incapable of through the nitty-gritty prism of halachic categories of Tuma and Tara. Larry.
As long as we're going on about it, if you continue in the Talmud,
yes,
Rav Papa says, by God, they cannot even create an entity as large as a camel. They do not create anything. So there were rabbis who I think did not.
Of course, and Rashi is selecting one line out of an interesting, again, sometimes it's helpful to imagine the Talmud as a bunch of rabbis sitting across the table and disagree with each other as we might, right? It means this, no, it means this, I believe this, and this is not a univocal position in that piece of Talmud, but it's loud enough that Rashi chooses to lift it and encode it here or in place it here as an explanation for why the Chartimim couldn't do this, and by implication, Rashi is saying, but had it been bigger, insects, maybe they would have been able to do so. Good. Anyone else on Lo Yacholu? All right. Let's go to verse 15. I really need a Larry Herman system for whom I've called on to read, because I always forget week to week. So, does anybody want to read? Renee.
ויאמרו חרטומנים אל פרעה, אצבע אלוהים הוא ויחזק לב פרעה ולא שמע עליהם כאשר דיבר אדוני.
Okay, try to translate.
The sorcerer said to Pharaoh, it's the finger of God that's hardened, strengthened the heart of Pharaoh, and he didn't hear them as Hashem spoke.
Good. So if we break that down a little bit, so in response to their own inability to do whatever they were trying to do in the previous verse, they come to some humble recognition, and they say to Pharaoh, right, almost sounds Mel Brooks-ish, right? There's something bigger than Phil, right? I think there's a God involved here. Etzba Elohim he, right? This is the finger of God. There's a nitty-gritty question as to what the preposition he is referring to, because he is feminine, and it's hard to know what the antecedent is, right? It's not the kinim. That would have been Etzba Elohim Haim. Some people say that the unnamed antecedent is the Makkah, the plague, right? The word Makkah doesn't appear, but the plague, which is a feminine word, is the feminine thing that he is referring to, that this is the finger of God. And the Vav after that is a Vav Ha, I always forget the name of this one. No, the opposite. the vav that becomes a but or nevertheless, but nevertheless, despite the fact that his own people came to him and said, hey, there's a real God here and we're in trouble, his heart remained or strengthened again or hardened again. He did not listen to them. The them is the chartumim, kasher diber Adonai. I want to show you what Uncle says on this, which is interesting. Let me just open it on the screen too, in case anyone doesn't have it. So this is what Uncle says. Can someone go to that laptop and just move the bar all the way to the bottom? So here's the Uncle where the cursor is. V'amaru charashaya, the charash in Aramaic and in Hebrew is like a soothsayer, like magician. The soothsayer said to Pharaoh, ha mecha min kadam Adonai. So Uncle basically kind of deals with that, the he in the Hebrew verse, and adds in the Aramaic word macha, which is similar to the Hebrew word makah. This plague, min kadam Adonai, it comes from God, which means he doesn't translate the word finger. It's interesting. He's paraphrasing. Most of the time, Uncle translates, he's paraphrasing here. Why he's paraphrasing here, I don't know. There is an Aramaic word for finger. And the rest of the verse is as you'd expect. Pharaoh, his heart became strong. Below Kabel, he didn't receive, didn't listen. Minhun from them, Kamad de Milel Adonai, as God had said. Okay. Questions, comments on the verse before we see what Rashi says? Yes, Marshall.
Don't know how to use this. Robert Alter has an interesting way of translating it.
Okay.
And the soothsayer said to Pharaoh, quote, God's finger it is, exclamation point. What follows that? And Pharaoh's heart toughened, and he did not heed them, just as the Lord had spoken.
Right. He's emphasizing the fact that the pronoun happens after the phrase. It's by Elohim, he. God's finger, it is. It certainly is. Good. Norm?
Two things. One is the presence of Elohim and Alehem in the same verse means that it could be, yes, he didn't listen to them. He didn't hear them. But it also could mean he didn't hear God. He shut out the Holy One. Also, it's really significant to me that here we have an explicit use of the idea that the plague was a finger of God, which ties directly into a page of the Haggadah where we multiply plagues.
Yeah.
And the basis is that the 10 plagues were the finger of God, and then at the Red Sea, it's the whole hand of God, so we multiply over and over again.
Great. Thank you for that. Rick?
Yes, hi. Me, right? Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering if the etzba was the he. It's etzbaot is the plural, right? Fingers?
Etzbaot is the plural, but I think the etzba itself is a masculine noun, I think.
Oh, because then the he would go to the finger. And then great about what Norm said about Alehem and Elohim. So who's the Alehem? If it's not God, did he not listen to Aaron and Moses, or did he not listen to the Chartumim? I think it's the latter in this case, but he doesn't listen to anybody. So anyway.
Yeah, etzba is definitely a feminine noun. Huh.
My recollection is that if it's parts of the body that are in plural, that it's feminine, but it's like Rosh is only one, so it's masculine. That's my recollection.
I definitely know that to be the case when it comes to things that there are two of.
But there are 5 fingers on hand. Maybe it's anything that's plural.
It could be. I didn't remember. There are some Hebrew nouns whose singular looks masculine and whose plural looks feminine, and they're feminine. And there's some whose singular looks masculine and whose plural looks feminine, that are masculine. It's very
in the dictionary. There's a nun after the word. Yeah. I can't remember. That means masculine, doesn't it?
No. Yeah. Nekeva.
Nun means nekeva, which is feminine.
Nekeva. Yeah. Okay.
Rabbi, also on he, just as a Torah reader, I've heard people, not in this congregation, I've heard it pronounced heave. And I just wanted to underline that the biblical vav there, you pronounce it like a yud if it's a chirik underneath.
There's very, 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 very little non-phonetic aspects to Hebrew reading. This is one of the places, right? It's pronounced he, not heave. I see how
in IsraelHebrew.com, the word for etzba is a feminine noun.
Yeah. That's what I wanted. That it's feminine? Yep. Okay. Barry and then Rebecca and then Larry.
So I need some help here. In the Torah, it's vechazak lev paro, which my translation is his heart remained hardened, like it already he didn't do this. It remained hardened. In Onkelos, the word is ve'ita kef liba. Does that imply that he hardened his heart?
No, it's the same form. It's just the root is takaf, which means to either to attack or to be strong, but it's the same form of the verb in Hebrew and in Aramaic. A lot of hands. Rebecca, Larry, Marshall.
I was just thinking about why does it use the word etzba? Why finger? Why do they point to that? And maybe it's a foreshadowing that there are going to be 10 plagues, 10 fingers. So
very nice. A foreshadowing, almost of their premonition that we're going to, each one of these is a finger. I never thought about that. Larry?
I just want to point out that the term used here is Elohim and not the tetragrammaton Adonai or anything else. So indicating that the magicians were saying that this is the finger of like
some god.
Some god.
Yeah.
Not so they didn't know God.
Yeah. They didn't say this is the finger of the Kadosh Baruch Hu.
Exactly.
The Ribono Shel Olam. Marshall.
Again, alter, as opposed to using the word hardened for yechazak, he translates it as toughened.
Okay. I was saying, however, Fox translates the verse. The magician said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of a god." So Everett Fox agrees with you, Larry, that the use of Elohim here is not a nothing. The finger of a god. Did
you see the footnote that he wrote about the finger of a god? That it's God's direct intervention in human affairs. The only other occurrence of that expression is in Exodus 31:18, and in the text that retells the story. And in the later case, it refers to the divine writing on the 2 tablets of testimony.
Right. So Etzba Elohim, the other place that appears in the Torah, has to do with Luchot, right? How we got the 2 tablets. Larry, did Aryeh Kaplan translate this interestingly?
Not in terms of the God part, but he says, it is the finger, and he has a note on this, of God, said the master symbolist to Pharaoh. But Pharaoh remained obstinate and would not listen, just as God had predicted. His note is etzba.
Louder, please.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so sorry. Should I read the translation again? Or?
Yeah.
It is the finger of God, said the master symbolist to Pharaoh, but Pharaoh remained obstinate and would not listen, just as God had predicted. The note on etzba is, etzba in Hebrew, in ancient Egyptian, the word etzba or tseba also denotes finger, but it also denotes retribution. The Egyptian occultists may have been also saying it is God's retribution.
Look at this translation, the one from 1963, really interesting. And the magician said to Pharaoh, "This is indeed an act of higher powers, but not of the eternal." Right? Even more agrees with you, Larry. Right? He's not willing to allow the Egyptians to actually refer to Hashem. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he did not listen to Moses Aaron as the eternal had said. Okay, let's see what Rashi says on Etzba Elohim. Who is reading?
I was.
All right, Renee.
Etzba Elohim hu makazo eno al yedei kashpim.
Kishafim.
Me'at hamakom hi Kasher diber Adonai
Oh, yeah,
v'lo
that's the next one. So just translate that one.
Okay, so Etzba Elohim, it's a finger of God. That the sorcerers said that the plague is not from witchcraft, but from the omnipresence.
Good, right? I think Rashi's doing two things in this commentary. He's resolving a grammatical question and he's resolving a content question. Anybody want to weigh in on that? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think it takes care of the grammatical question here that talk about that the he is the makah.
Okay.
And the second part was that was the grammatical. The other one is that it's coming from a God, but not the. It's interesting because he's saying it's the omnipresent God, so he's taking makom as if it was Adonai and not as Elohim.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what Rashi is doing is he's describing in our language what he's imagining that the magicians were trying to say to Pharaoh, but he's speaking to us, Rashi, so he's just using hamakom because we know what that word means. I think the content what Rashi is saying is, right, like what were these people really communicating to Pharaoh? They were communicating to Pharaoh that, there have been 3 of these. We've tried. This is not just another powerful sorcerer, right? This is not that word kishuf, kaf shefin. You may know that word from mechashefa, which is witch. Mechashefa lo techaya, the shortest verse in the Torah, I think. No. Well, it depends on if you read lo tirtzach and all those as their own verses. But 3-word verse, mechashefa lo techaya. What's that?
Jesus wept.
Jesus wept. Yeah, but what's the original Greek? How many words?
Uvnei Dan Chushim is the shortest.
In letters or words? Oh, because Uvnei Dan is a hyphen. Rick, you emerged from nowhere and now we can't hear you.
I muted myself, and the Chushim doesn't have the vav, so it's Uvnei Dan Chushim is the shortest sentence besides the 10 Commandments. Letters, sir.
Letters, got it. Okay. Anyway, so Hafim here meaning, I think what Rashi is having them say that we are in a different realm than we thought. If it was our power over Kishufim magic versus another nation's power, we could hold our own. This is not happening on this realm. It's happening on that realm. Something up there. We're out of our league, boss. Right? And it's the first time that we're seeing Yeush, a sense of giving up and hopelessness amongst the courtiers. Up until now, they seem to be up for the battle, of ready to present themselves as best as possible. Barbara?
Why is it pronounced the finger of God when it should be a finger of God? There is no hey in front of it.
Okay, so in smichut, where you have 2 nouns that are modifying one another, if the second of the words is a proper noun,
it's a word pair. Okay,
the whole thing is definite, right? So
it's a word
if
pair.
I say if it was etzba Barbara, right? I wouldn't have to say ha etzba. It would just be it's the second word in smichut that would get the hey, and since you don't need a hey in front of a proper name, that's why you could read this as a or the. Yeah.
I got it. Thank you.
Elohim could be indefinite.
Correct. Elohim could be indefinite. The question is the finger indefinite? Because if you were trying to...
If one is, then the other one.
Not necessarily. It could be the finger of a god. It could be a finger of a god.
But if the finger would be Etzbaha Elohim. Elohim is lowercase God, but Elohim, she's right, would be a finger.
No, he's saying they can't hear you. No. Yeah, but they didn't hear your apology. Okay. All right. Let's finish. Yeah, Marshall. Sorry.
I just want to
microphone.
Just the full, what Rashi is based on comes out of Shemot Rabbah, which is really quite beautiful, which says, Kevan shara'u achartumim shel yuchlu lahotzi hakinim. That once the magicians saw that they could not get rid of the lice, miyad hikiru shahayu hamasim ma'aseh Elohim. They immediately saw that this was the work of God. Lo ma'aseh shedim. This is not the work of demons, I guess. Od lo chashashu or chashvu lidmod atzman leMoshe lotzi hamakot. And they no longer thought or never suspected or never thought to compare themselves to Moses to get rid of these plagues.
What was the source?
Midrash Rabbah.
Shemot Rabbah.
Yeah. Barbara, is your hand up again or still? Okay. Let's finish off the Rashi. This is going to be the exact same comment that Rashi said on verse, at the end of verse 10, okay? 11, excuse me. So, because the end of our verse is, right, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he didn't listen to them, kasher diber Adonai, as God had said. The question on that is?
Kasher diber Adonai v'lo yishma alechem Pharaoh.
Before you read, Renee, so on the phrase kasher diber Adonai, as God had said, one could ask the question, when? Like, and when did God say that? In the same way we asked that question before. And the answer is just quoting 4 words from a verse, and the verse is chapter 7, verse 4. And the verse is v'lo yishma alechem Paro. So everyone can go back again, look at the beginning of chapter 7, because you all have the whole book of Shemot in front of you. And this is kind of the beginning of this exchange. V'lo yishma alechem Paro. God says to Moses and Aaron, he's not going to listen. V'natati et yadi b'Mitzrayim, but I'm going to place my hand on Egypt, and eventually it's going to happen. So every time, Rashi is not going to say this every single time, but as we go through the plagues, and after each plague, we have the Torah saying that Pharaoh's heart was hardened and didn't listen to them. We're sometimes going to have us say, kasher diber Adonai, as God said, and Rashi is going to keep reminding us, not that God just said it right now, but that God predicted the intransigence and the recalcitrance.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.